Good afternoon and welcome to the Jewish Policy Center webinar. I am Shoshana Bryan, Senior Director of the JPC and your host. Our guest today is Professor Mark Meirowitz. But before we go to him, I think we need to address President Trump's Gaza announcement. There's going to be a lot of parsing of the announcement, what it means, how to implement it. I don't want to do that here. I want to remind you that this is President Trump's Gaza 2.0. In late January of 2020, President Trump put forward a very detailed proposal called the Vision for Peace. It was introduced at a ceremony in the East Room of the White House with Prime Minister Netanyahu and 3 Arab ambassadors, none of whose governments had relations with Israel. I was honored to be there, and I have to tell you, I was shocked to see those ambassadors in the room. But 9 months later, the Abraham Accords were born. The vision included some very important points, and I'm going to just go over them real fast here because how they have evolved makes sense in the context of Gaza 2.0. President Trump said the Arab states made a mistake in 1948 when they, quote, chose to attack instead of recognizing the state of Israel. The Palestinians, he said, are the primary pawn in this adventurism, and it is time for that sad chapter in history to end. That was his first attempt to bring the Arabs into the process of fixing the mistake they made. They were no longer off the hook, and they're not off the hook today. Second, he was extraordinarily sympathetic to the Palestinian people, particularly young people who he said were, quote, growing up with no hope. He offered them a Palestinian nation state as the nation state of the Palestinian people. But he said they had to, quote, meet challenges of peaceful coexistence. And there were 4, he said. They needed basic human rights and protection against financial and political corruption. They needed to fight against Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They had to end incitement against Israel, and they had to stop paying for terrorism. They did not do any of those things. So now the program looks different. He's put out different requirements because they didn't meet the first requirements. So we're going to talk about this again, but I think this is the opening salvo of a longer process. We will follow the process. But we're also not going to forget why we're here today. Syria, the fall of Assad, Turkey, the challenges in the region. We're going there today. But first, your commercial, of course. In short form, the Jewish Policy Center was founded in 1985. You can find us on our website, jewishpolicycenter.org. There you can sign up for our Insight articles and our magazine In Focus Quarterly. The winter issue of In Focus is up right now. It is entitled Iran, Freedom or Fire. It is not a question. Again, jewishpolicycenter.org. The JPC supports a strong American defense capability, U.S.-Israel security cooperation, and missile defense. We support the legitimacy and security of Israel against anyone who would deny them. And we support the government of Israel in its determination to secure its people and its borders from the malign forces around it. We advocate for small government, low taxes, free trade, fiscal responsibility, energy security, free speech, and intellectual diversity. Today, our guest is Dr. Mark Meirowitz, Professor of Humanities at the Maritime College of the State University of New York. He teaches American history, foreign policy, and the Constitution. You can find him in Focus periodically, writing on those American government-related issues. He has a PhD in political science from Fordham University and a JD from Brooklyn Law School. His domestically oriented classes include the Supreme Court and the Constitution, the immigrant experience in America, American women's history, and labor history. So I say, go to In Focus, look at our back issues, and you will find some great articles by Mark Meirowitz on American government. But today, we are going to tap into his foreign policy expertise. We are going to take advantage of his very deep and broad understanding of Turkey and the way Turkey sees its regional interests. The overthrow of Bashar Assad in Syria by HTS ended a horrifying chapter of Syrian history. It also fundamentally changes the Middle East politically and militarily, including perhaps for Iran. So it's with great pleasure, Mark Meirowitz, we turn to you for expertise and better understanding. And the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Shoshana. And it is a tremendous privilege to do this and to be affiliated with the Jewish Policy Center. And tremendous kudos And thanks to you for the excellent work you do for JPC. It is truly a standout. It's also very important for the security and future of Israel to keep talking about these issues and understanding the meaning of them and the implications for Israel and the Jewish people. So thank you very much for this privilege and for what you do. So I thought I would begin by doing a little dramatis personae, like a little list of the menu of who's on first or who's in the Middle East here. And honestly, it's truly dizzying. There is in terms of trying to figure out, before I do that, what is going to happen, I quote someone who said that risk can be calculated, but uncertainty cannot be calculated. And we really are living through a period of tremendous uncertainty. And to connect the dots from what you just so very well described in terms of the vision for peace and Gaza and the announcement, it's very important to understand that what we're talking about today in principle is really connected directly to the situation in Gaza and what engendered from that, namely the fact that Israel took out and weakened Iranian defenses, basically pretty much hopefully destroyed Hezbollah, has put Hamas in a very bad position, although they're still holding hostages. And in terms of the Middle East and in terms of Syria, one needs to understand that what we saw, which is the incredible takeover of the Syrian, at least government, by this guy by the name, the guy in the suit. There's the man in the pinstripe suit. This is the man in the suit with the beard, who used to be a jihadist, but now wears either a uniform or a suit with a beard. And he is there and able to have taken power with HTS, was originally a jihadist with al-Nusra Front. Any books that you read about Syria and the jihad, you will see al-Jolani, that was his original name, is a very important figure. He's been involved in it, but apparently, according to the reports, he's abandoned the jihadism and he's now the man in the suit. But why is he there and why was he able to take over the government and Assad flee? And that is because of the weakness of Iran, the weakness of Hezbollah, and the fact that Russia was preoccupied with Ukraine. All of these factors, the confluence of these factors, allowed, I actually discussed this with an Israeli officer, and I was marveling at, HTS is this group. It's just not a very big group numerically, but they've been able to take power. How come? Weakness because, al-Bashar al-Jilani has been fighting these battles for years, but the regime was strong. Russia was a backer. Iran was a backer. Hezbollah, all of that was there, and all of that fell away. We can talk a little bit more about al-Shara, who is an extraordinarily interesting figure and very, very hard to figure out. So in terms of the menu of parties, if you wanted, you mentioned Turkey, certainly, and Turkey is a very significant element here. And I do say that, something like Olaf Scholz called before around Ukraine, it is a Zeitenwende, a tectonic shift. I fear we have another tectonic shift in the Middle East. Gaza war and now this next step is so, I believe, pernicious and dangerous for the state of Israel, and for reasons we can delve into, because the potentiality, for example, right now, the Turkish leader has met with this al-Shara, and they're entering into a defense pact between Turkey and Syria, which will involve Turkey establishing bases. Turkey already has troops in Syria, which it has originally in connection with its battle against the Kurds. We'll talk about that. But this is a long-range thing where bases will be built, including bases close to the Golan Heights, as well as providing F-16 and air cover and air defenses and building up the military infrastructure of Syria. Again, uncertainty can't be figured out. We don't know how that's going to play out or whether other regimes and other states will push back for reasons we can talk about. So Turkey has had a long-standing interest in Syria. It's been actually an antagonist of Syria, antagonist of Assad. Syria has always been a problematic player for Turkey, but in this development now Syria is an ally of Turkey. So let's move on to some other, and we can delve more into Turkey and what Turkey wants in Syria, profoundly important for the world, for the region, and of course, for the state of Israel. In Syria itself, you have I'll call it a cauldron because that's what it is, of all sorts of parties who are really fighting with each other, at odds with each other. And although we have at the moment a little bit of, let's say, quiet, although the Turkish forces are fighting against the Kurds in Syria, but this al-Jilani, al-Shara, presents himself as a pragmatic leader who wants stability. And here are some of the groups in this, I'll call it a mishmash for want of a good political term. On the Kurdish side, you have, we have a group called the YPG and PYD, and everybody loves abbreviations in Syria. And these are basically Kurdish groups, although, and they form the backbone of what's called the Syrian SDF, Syrian Defense Forces. This is misunderstood because it's not a Kurdish army. It consists of Kurds and Arabs and Christians. It's a very, very mixed bag. In addition, we have HTS, which we've talked about, which is headed up by al-Shara, which is the rebel group that came in and took power, and Assad fled. In the Kurdish world, and we have the PKK, which I should mention, which is the terrorist group in Turkey, with which the Turks say the YPG, PYD Kurds in Syria are directly connected. Now, I've heard this directly from Turkish diplomats. I don't think it's far-fetched, but the United States does not identify the YPG and PYD as terrorists, but they do identify the PKK. In Turkey, we had ICE fighting with ISIS. And who was fighting with ISIS? The Kurds. The Kurds were fighting ISIS, established prisons with ISIS prisoners, and the Kurds were fighting with the United States. We have some forces there. We only have 900 left because President Trump withdrew a number of forces in the past. Now, in the region itself, we have a couple of other interesting players. Of course, we have Russia. Russia was very heavily in Syria. They have bases, and they were supporting the Assad regime. They wanted a warm water port at Tartus. They have at Khmeimim. They're still there. And the Russians visited and basically made nice. And al-Shara was nice, very pragmatic. But keeping in mind, I don't want to forget to mention this, but Russia has a seat on the Security Council. So al-Shara, you do not, as they say, pull on Superman's cape. So they got the Russians sort of out, maybe, but they still need the Russians for oil, for grain. There are all kinds of things that Russia can be used for. Iran was a major player to try to. Oh, wait a minute. I don't know. Just a second. I'm so sorry. My battery. Bear with me. I apologize. Yes. Just bear with me 1 second. 1 second.
So I always claim to be the least computer capable person in this series, but
Oh, this was a very low-tech problem. I didn't plug in the computer. In any event, so I hope everyone will forgive me. The whole Russian thing it could be a story in and of itself, but we'll move on to Iran. Iran was heavily involved in supporting Assad, but they've been weakened. There was a recent discussion, I think it was maybe Ehud Barak, I can't remember, was talking to Aaron David Miller, and is like, how would you analogize the situation in Iran to a soccer game? He says, Iran is playing soccer but doesn't have a goalie, okay? Israel took out all the Iranian defenses. I mean, they really destroyed Iran. And it's interesting, al-Shara said, Iran, you cannot, because Iran and Russia were fighting him and trying to kill him and his group. He said, Iran, you're not coming back. Russia, and for the meantime, I'm talking to you. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a major power in the Middle East. It's a competitor of Turkey. They've been in contact with al-Shara. And if you want to rebuild Syria, if you want to go forward and be part of the Middle East, you need Saudi Arabia. They have big funds. Turkish economy is way down. Al-Shara needs Saudi. We can talk more about that. Qatar also. Qatar, they're meeting with the emir, very important in the reconstruction of Syria and moving forward. And the problem with that, I mean, all of these intersecting, it's almost like a 1,000-piece puzzle here, Shoshana. You have Qatar's support of Hamas. How does Hamas play out in this with Turkey and Qatar? Hard to know what it all means. But a lot of the parties that were powerful and influential yesterday are no longer in the scene today, which presents to Israel, and I wanted to talk for a moment about that because that to me is really significant. Israel is in the Golan Heights, and we know President Trump reaffirmed his support for Israel's acquisition of the Golan Heights. Israel also moved into a buffer zone near the Golan Heights. It's interesting that there are elements in Syria today, some Druze and Kurds and others, who are saying, we want to be part of Israel. Please annex us. Please, please, please. These people in charge, we don't trust them. We don't trust them to protect us. Al-Shara is very pragmatic. He talks about inclusiveness. We're worried. We want Israel. And in fact, Gideon Sa'ar, I think Gideon says foreign minister of Israel has made it very clear, Israel supports the Kurds. So I think I got everybody, but and again, one other thing about the PKK and the Kurds. The PKK movement is clearly a movement that has existential threat, and Turkey perceives it. And every Turk I've ever spoken to has the feeling, because they've attacked civilians in Turkey, they've killed many people in Turkey, but there is a movement afoot in Turkey now to try to do another peace process with the Kurds, which would be very pivotal to try to figure out a solution for Syria as well. So if that doesn't totally pull apart the 1,000-piece puzzle, I think I got most of the factors. One point that I didn't mention is the militia that Turkey supports in Syria, which is the Syrian National Army. So as you can see, everybody's fighting with everybody. But right now we have a moment of a bit of maybe some homeostasis, but it could all tank and it could inure clearly a long range to the tremendous detriment of Israel, it seems to me. And I'm actually very, very concerned about it.
So are you ready for questions? Because I think
absolutely.
a bunch of stuff on the plate. And okay. You mentioned, actually, let's go backwards, the Syrian National Army. These, first of all, tell us something about them. But aren't these the same guys who are in Africa? And we didn't even talk, I mean, if you want to expand the map here, we can talk about Turkey and Africa, Turkey and Libya, Turkey selling arms to a whole bunch of countries in Africa. Isn't the Syrian National Army something different from the armed forces of Syria? Or is it just an extension of that?
No, there are foreign fighters in there, no question about it. And, Turkey's reach out to the world is profound, particularly Somalia. They've been involved in Somalia for years, attended some different, Turkish functions of the Turkish American community here, and you'd see, like in Washington, see Somali people showing up, right? I turned around and I was like, who are these guys? I'm sorry to say it, I'm not being disrespectful, but who are these guys? And Libya, very, very important. Now, I would say just on Libya, it's important to keep in mind that, yes, Turkey is involved in Libya, but Turkey's involvement in Libya also relates to its need for its maritime memorandum of understanding. I've always thought a lot of what Turkey does in Libya is to get that MOU, because Egypt has one with Greece, and the whole Mediterranean is in flux because you have a number of countries who are exploring in the Mediterranean, right, including Israel. And the view was always that the Piri Reis of Turkey cannot drill. We don't want them to drill. And then what happened was everybody started drawing zones. My dissertation is on the law of the sea. So I love this. I don't love it because it's pretty darn ridiculous. But everybody started drawing lines of where they had their ability to explore, to fish, etc. So that's the Libya piece. I mean, yes, Libya is very, very important, obviously, but for the reach out. I wouldn't say you get a tremendous plus factor back with Libya, because to me, Syria is the one that presents for Turkey an incredible opportunity. Why? Because Syria is an Arab country. And that's why I think this is a real game changer. Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, neo-Ottomanism, its idea that it's expanding, not so much in Africa. I don't think that really, bends people. I mean, again, it's their expansion around the world, but going into an Arab country and possibly directing its future, I believe, and many Turks who I've spoken to are very, very concerned about it because they don't think the Arab states, Saudi, Qatar, and others are going to accept. They didn't, well, again, the Ottoman Empire had a very bad relationship with the Arab world. Do they want another? And this has been, we know that President Erdogan has spoken about this neo-Ottomanism, Gezi Park, and he's even said, Turkey is greater than its 732,000 square kilometers. It is bigger than its borders. It's a mission. And, that's a perfectly, I guess, fine wish idea, an idea, dream idea. But when you put it into place, it starts to step on toes. And the Arabs are very, very concerned about this. And I'm not so sure that the idea of, an invasion by Turkey into Syria or to, upset the apple cart is going to be accepted by the Arabs. And certainly the question is, Turkey's coming in and how much involvement are they going to have in actually running, controlling the Syrian Arab, I guess it's still called the Republic, Syrian Arab Republic or the Syrian Arab, I don't know, something. It's not an Ottoman, it's not a Turkish state. I should mention and not forget that there are 3+ million Syrian refugees in Turkey today. And Turks want them back to Syria. So as you see, I mean, the fighters are there. And I have to say about SNA, it's very important to understand. Al-Shara has said that the Syrian National Army is going to be integrated into the forces of the Syrian army. He wants to do that with the Kurdish forces. He's not able to do it yet. But that one, I think, is maybe a thing of the past. I'm not so sure it's going to be a group that's going to go forward for Turkey and do its thing because it doesn't need it. It doesn't need it. It's going to be coming in with its military, with its bases, with its F-16s, and its infrastructure. Turkish infrastructure is already in there trying to help organize things. So it's an involvement that I think creates issues probably definitely for the Arab world. I think they'd be very concerned.
So you've talked about the Arab states making overtures to Syria and Turkey obviously overtures to Syria or whatever organization they do together. Is this an argument for the future of Syria? Are the Saudis and the Qataris saying, look, you guys are actually Syrians, you're actually Arabs, you need to be on our side of the Great Divide. And Turkey's saying, on the other hand, no, we're your next door neighbor. We can help you. We can do all this stuff. Is that what's going on?
No question about it. It's a highly, as I mentioned, even in the Syrian Defense Forces, that is a mishmash, Arabs, large numbers of Arabs. In fact, al-Shara, in a very interesting interview he gave with The Economist, I tell you, everybody must read it. It is fascinating because he talks about, oh, by the way, there's a lot of Arabs over there. It's not just Kurds. And he also, I mean, yes, it's not just the push and pull with the outside parties. It's a push to figure out what to do internally with Syria and how to plan ahead for its future. That's directly connected with how much involvement they're going to have. But yeah, Saudi's involvement, Qatar's involvement, all of the Arab states, no question, are looking at this, because this is the really big, it's almost like, I hate to make, it's almost like Turkey won the lottery. I mean, they won the bingo. Bingo, B6, you get a country now. But this country was part of the Ottoman Empire. And interestingly enough, Syria has had a lot of conflict with Turkey. Indeed, in the Cold War, they diverged. Turkey was on one side, Syria's on the other side. So they've always had problems together. Now the situation clicks into place like a bunch of levers, and suddenly Turkey is sitting on top and it's maybe calling the shots. So how far can it be involved? This defense pact, I believe, and I mean, I'm not sitting in anybody as a fly on anybody's wall in all these countries, but remember, ties back to the point that we talked about, your very nice introduction. Abraham Accords, Saudi, what's the trajectory for the Middle East? Is Saudi going to have a peace agreement with Israel? How is that going to play out? If that's the case, and I don't know, I wasn't certainly not in the meeting with Netanyahu, but I am quite sure that the idea that Turkey is going to have military bases inside Syria near the Golan Heights presents, I'm not saying it's there, but it could be a problem, because once Syria rearms itself, once it remilitarizes itself, well, you hear a lot about, for example, the Turkish representatives who went to visit Damascus, went to the mosque, and it's a very, very big realization for them. Right? Really, a really important realization to have this step. But the question is, where does it go? How far does it go? And that I think is the concern in terms of, because I can tell you that a lot of the Turks do believe, who I've spoken to, that Israel, and al-Shara says it in the interview in The Economist, Israel's got to get out. Israel should not be in Syria. Now, what happens if that comes to a head? What happens if that comes to a head and remilitarize Syria? Are we back again, square one? Are we back again in 67, 73? Are we back again in the way we were in a potential for a full-scale war? I don't know, but I'm worried.
So I would point out that the good news for Israel is that it's on the top of the Golan Heights this time, not
That is right. That's right. I'm on Termon. They're there. Absolutely, of course.
Let me give you both a question and a comment from a listener who points out that it's not 900 troops. It's 2,000 troops, because Biden was adding to U.S. troops in the region, and we now have 2,000 troops there.
I debate. You talk about the U.S. troops.
U.S. troops.
I've seen different numbers. The latest numbers I see 900. There were 2,000, but you may be adding in American troops in Iraq as well. I don't know all the numbers, but I would say that requires further research. So that I've been actually looking at that, and I mean, there's certainly, let's put it this way, we would agree, and with your listener, there definitely are U.S. troops there, and that is really important. And I don't want to miss the point to say that CENTCOM, which is in there, CENTCOM, and I've heard it directly, this idea that, the U.S. military still feels a certain unhappiness about the fact that Turkey did not allow the United States to use its airspace to traverse, and its land space even to traverse in the war in Iraq. And these CENTCOM soldiers, U.S. soldiers, have fought with the Kurdish forces of YPG, and they fought with them. And in fact, the Kurds maintain these prisons of ISIS prisoners. Now, the solution, according to al-Shara and even Turkish diplomats, is basically, disband the prison and put the prisoners back to wherever they came from. Or al-Shara's point is, I'll take over this, or maybe Turkey will take it over, and they'll be responsible, because Turkey's argument is that, and I think it's true, that they were fighting ISIS along with the United States, along with the West, and that they're capable of taking care of this issue. At the same time, again, how do you know? Again, my uncertainty point. We don't know. How does that play out? Because unless and until we know the fate of the SDF, of the Kurds in Syria, we need to know the result there. I don't think you can make any decisions on that. And in fact, al-Shara in his interview says that he says Turkey's very worried about, listen to this, the presence of the PKK in northeast Syria. The PKK is not in northeast Syria. It's the YPG. So he's already buying into that. Turkey was preparing to launch a full-fledged war, but we asked them, Syrian HTS, to wait in order to give space for the negotiations. This is very important because what this means is that al-Shara understands his position. If he's the self-proclaimed president, no elections for 4 years, he canceled the constitution, but he's the guy sitting in the seat, and he's a leader, self-proclaimed. He's the one-man show. He walked in and took over of an Arab state. Does he want? Right now, he's moving his chess pieces. Does he want Turkey to come in and take over the chessboard? And then attack the Kurds? Because let's understand, Turkey's main motivation right now, it also got the other thing is that they have Syria as a friendly ally and they can go in and have influence. But all along, their main issue was, number one, eliminating the YPG, eliminating the Kurds. Why? Because the fear was that they would establish a state or statelet or an autonomous area akin to what is existing in Iraq, the Kurdistan regional government. And that's their fear. Their fear that then that would link up somehow to the Kurds in Turkey. And somehow that would be, now I know I'm going out, but I just have to say one thing very important. The Kurds, it's a very sad story. The Kurds are dispersed all over the world, in only a number of countries. In Iran, they've had a heart in Iraq, in Turkey, Azerbaijan, etc. But how did they end up in this very unfortunate situation? And that is to do with international relations. And that is to say that the early 20th century, in the Treaty of Sevres, and this has importance for Kurds and for Turks. In the Treaty of Sevres, the Kurds, as well as other minorities, were going to get self-determination. At the same time, the European powers decided we're going to dismember Turkey. We're going to parcel it out and give it away, which relates to something I'll mention, the Sevres fear, in a moment. But then Ataturk was able to organize his military and push that back. And then in the Treaty of Lausanne, we have the Kurds are now no longer getting autonomy. They're out of the picture, right? And Turkey is now a republic, and it has its self-determination. For Turkey, the Treaty of Sevres, which are purported to dismember Turkey and give it out to the world, there's something called a Sevrophobia. And I think this is very important to understand what we've been talking about here, about what Turkey has been doing. There's a certain element of, I think, insecurity. I call it insecurity. And I say it with respect to the Turks because I understand how they feel because, they've always were called the sick man of Europe. Nobody took them seriously. Then they had a international meeting, and they went and they had a dinner, and they cut up Turkey into pieces, and they all went home and thought, gee, that's a good thing to do. So they don't feel they get respect. They feel the rest of the world is against them. And so when they actually come on the scene in international relations, and they are not only a major power, they're a pivotal power in the world, even with Syria now. With Syria now, I would say extra pivotal, is there such a word? But the fact of the matter is that, when NATO was trying to decide whether Sweden or Finland could join NATO, President Biden said, I say they're going to join NATO. That was not enough. The United States of America agreed, but Turkey had to agree because unanimous. And Turkey held back and entered into you can pick it up on the internet, the tripartite agreement with Sweden, Finland, Turkey. And it says Sweden has to do certain things, Finland has to do certain things. And then, okay, Turkey's a player. President Erdogan is the player. And also, I just wanted to add one thing before I turn it back to you, and that's on Russia. It's very important. Russia, how is it amazing multitasking that Turkey supports Ukraine, yet at the same time, it does not support sanctions against Russia, and also was pivotal in getting the grain out. Actually, you mentioned Africa. So the same multitasking that we see there, we potentially will see in the Syrian situation, I think, because for reasons I'll explain.
This goes to two questions. The one I didn't have a chance to ask you a minute ago, but two questions. So you're looking at Turkey as on top of the pile, and Turkey has ambitions, and Erdogan certainly has ambitions. So turn in the other direction. A listener asks, can you discuss Turkey's pan-Turkic vision for the Turkish-speaking people of Asia and how Turkey relates to those people? That's one question, wait. And that, by the way, has potential for, again, conflict with Russia because those are former Soviet republics and Russia still thinks they own them. So that's one question. You hang on to that question. And then you get the question, how might Erdogan's neo-Ottoman ambitions conflict with al-Jilani's and Syria's Sunni Caliphate ideas? Now, some of those ideas are the same. Some of them are not the same. They're all Sunni Muslims, but there's a difference between the Ottoman Empire and the Sunni Caliphate. And could that be a source of tension between Turks and Syrians, or at least Syrian leadership?
Well, to take the second part first, clearly, I think I sort of intimated it to that point, that no doubt there is a clash between, and we don't know exactly what al-Shar al-Jilani, we don't know what he really thinks, because, he's very pragmatic. They asked him at the Economist interview, is Syria going to be a democracy? Is it going to adopt Sharia? And he goes like, depends what you mean by democracy. You got to tell me what you mean by democracy. And about Sharia, no, it's up to the people. If the people and the committee say so, I'll implement it. I mean, that's like nothing. That doesn't say anything. And it means that the possibility that, and that relates to the question in the sense that what's the objective here? What's the real objective of the HTS, of al-Shara? What are the next steps? And how are those going to develop? And do those fit in properly with Turkey's ambitions? Turkey has many ambitions. Because it wants to be a major power player. The neo-Ottomanism is definitely out there. But I wanted to mention, before I talk about the other part, that I didn't mention, and that is, this relates to that great Turkish politician, Tip O'Neill. And Tip O'Neill said, all politics is local. And this is true here as well. Why? Because President Erdogan has said that as long as I'm alive, I'd like to run again. But unfortunately, he is term limited. He has his second term or possibly his third term. There's a little debate about it, but he's definitely up in 28. He wants to run again, but he can't. Either the Constitution of Turkey has to be amended or have to call new elections. Okay, can you do it? No, because his party, the AK party, right, has not got enough votes. In order to get it over the goal, he needs the Kurdish party, the DEM. Now, the Kurdish party is in sync with Öcalan, the leader of the PKK, who is in prison, who has announced in cohort, if you can, I mean, really, your head spins, with the nationalist party that's allied with Erdogan, where they visited him in prison and he wants to come to the parliament and announce the end of the PKK insurgency. Now, you keep saying you can't believe there's more to this than what we talked about, but there is. Now, does that mean that's going to happen? Maybe not, because, and I heard this myself from a very, very close Turkish friend. He said, no, there will be no reconciliation with the PKK because there are people still alive today who are victims of their violence against civilians. So that's not happening, but if, in fact, they can do something along a peace process, that might tend to create a possibility, an opening for the Kurds in Syria to work something out with al-Shara al-Jilani. So we have a lot of moving pieces here. Now, the other part, when you say yes, certainly, and I mean, a good example would be Azerbaijan. I mean, that is a really good one to talk about. Certainly, there are many other Turkey, and then and the truth is that the brotherhood among the Turkic nations is deep in the heart of President Erdogan and the Turkish people, no question. But Azerbaijan, That's like my brother. That's the brothers. And we have an interesting thing with Azerbaijan because Azerbaijan is a great supporter of Israel. It is. At the same time, Azerbaijan has fought a war with Armenia. And Armenia is a tremendous, a longtime foe and adversary of Turkey. And that's probably another discussion. But I'm saying that support for Azerbaijan is very, very problematic. And you have Russia involved. Russia is a supporter of Armenia. So it's peeling away the onion doesn't get you to, of course, Turkey helped Azerbaijan to win that war and to take back that region called Nagorno-Karabakh, which is a disputed region which the Armenians took and would not allow and expel the Azerbaijanis, which is something they have, a very big, issue about. And the Turks were pivotal in helping Azerbaijan with that and trying to figure that out. But that is still a tremendous problem. Of course, there's a peace process in play between Turkey and Armenia, and that's a whole other problem. So yes, the pan-Turkic is deep in the hearts of Turkey, but I think right now, to the other point about that's the main pivot right now, I think, is the domestic politics to see if Erdogan can continue and at the same time to eliminate they have this issue with the Kurds to eliminate what they fear is a threat from the Kurdish group in Syria. This is number one on their list. And they have the extra benefit now of the fall of Assad. So we have a lot of unknowns.
So I asked you at one point when we were talking
Yes.
whether Iran is out of Syria, the HTS is in Syria, Turkey's in Syria, whether from the Israeli point of view, it was trading Shia jihad for Sunni jihad. So that was one question. But now it appears much more complicated because it's not clear that what the HTS is. They're trying to make the point that they are actually a legitimate player. And we did have a question from a listener asking, what could al-Jawlani do? What could Syria do? What could HTS do to give either the other Arabs or the West or Israel, if you care about it, some confidence that what they really want is to run Syria and not overthrow the region. It just looks much more complicated than it did last week when we discussed it as Sunni jihad versus Shia jihad. And it raises a question about Turkey and Israel.
Yes.
Because you also mentioned Azerbaijan, and Israel was instrumental in helping the Azerbaijanis in that war, as was Turkey. So they found themselves.
Absolutely.
Where are we going here? Where Turkey, Israel? Do Turkey, Israel, Mark?
Hey, the same thing with the Kurdistan regional government. My understanding was that Israel's also involved there, and Turkey, I mean, it's kind of like that frog and the scorpion, it's the Middle East. So when you think you got it figured out, I always say Turkey is like Rocky, that drink, anybody might enjoy it. When you take the Rocky and you pour it, it's nice and clear. But then when you add the water, it's totally murky. So far, hopefully we've been doing clear, but pretty soon all of this will be murky, maybe by tomorrow. With that preface, on Iran, I would add the fact that Iran is still trying to meddle and still trying to create problems, maybe, because there is a population of Alawites in Syria who are Shiites. And they lost their protector when Assad was taken out, and then that's a big issue. Yeah.
Just a reminder that Assad was an Alawite. I mean,
that's right.
Remind the audience. So he was actually a minority ruler in
right.
the larger space. And one of the things that he did was he protected to some extent other minorities. And so there was some, I wouldn't say happiness with Assad, but Christians were safe, Alawites were safe, So it's.
Well, I think with the Christians, I've always thought that the Syrian Orthodox Church, as part of the Orthodox Christian world, was allied or connected to the Russian Orthodox Church, and that maybe that had a factor as well. But no question, the Christians have been very worried about their vulnerability now that Assad is out of the picture. By the way, speaking of Assad, when the Russian diplomat came there to meet with al-Shara, al-Shara told him, I want Assad back for trial. Okay, so this is we're writing a chapter here. We're not writing the coda of this book. About Shia and Sunni, yeah, I mean, look, the Shia world lost a big malevolent protector when it lost Iran as a powerful force. And President Trump was very clear, you can't have a nuclear weapon, okay? You can't. But by the way, I'm sorry I'm digressing, but there's so much here. Turkey has a nuclear plant. Turkey has a nuclear plant that Russia is building. Hopefully the listeners there is no midterm exam after this, but I am telling you, I mean, this is so complicated. Turkey and Israel, I think, is a very important subject. Look, Turkey and Israel had really wonderful halcyon days. And the relationship between Turkey and Israel on trade and so forth have been pretty stable. Not super high, but and 5 billion, I don't know what the numbers were, and a number of key things. The business was being transacted, and that was going on. And in fact, we were reaching even a crescendo where, there were going to be energy deals between Turkey and Israel, and that Turkey would be a transshipper of energy from Leviathan fields, and all those things were being discussed. And then October 7th happened. And then the world turned upside down, literally. So the world before October 7th didn't look like that. There was a certain, now, yes, we hit a lot of glitches. We had Mavi Marmara, we had all those problems. There were apologies afterwards. There were, ambassadors were pulled, they went back. I think from the point of view of diplomacy, it's good to have ambassadors. Even if you don't get along, have ambassadors. You don't pull ambassadors. I've always said that to my friends. In any event, the relationship between Turkey and Israel now is very problematic. I don't know if they've terminated the trade or not, because interestingly enough, there was a rally, I think yesterday or the day before, and somebody in the crowd in Turkey held up a sign that said, shame on you, or shame on you for trading with Israel, or something like that. And then 5 minutes later, the sign disappeared. That's what I just saw it on Twitter. You can't believe everything you see on Twitter. But the bottom line is that, Turkish business people and Israeli have been doing business. People do business together. And if business is the motivator, then it's good and it's a win-win. If politics interferes, and as I said, there were real halcyon days. I've spoken to diplomats, Israelis and Turks, who remember those days, and those even included in the years of the AK Party. No question about it. On security, on strategy, we had fallings out, but for the most part, there were diplomatic relations. Then came the issue of October 7th, and then after that, understanding how you put Humpty Dumpty back together again is something that I don't think is a simple question. I think that the problem you have, the worry, I would say, to be candid, is that it gets worse.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's pretty sad right now. I think there's such potential for these countries to work together, such potential to do things together and do great things. I've always been a big believer in this relationship and a promoter of this relationship, and promoting, meetings and interactions and things like that, and those are very cordial. But at the same time, where we are now situation is, I think, problematic after October 7th, hugely so. And we just have to, I think, hope and pray it doesn't get any worse. This is exactly why I said with caution that the situation in Syria is a flashing, it's not a red line, by the way, that's what Obama passed. It's a red light. It's a flashing light that we have to pay very close attention to, because the potential of going really, really south is there. And al-Shara, and again, he's a one-man show. Hopefully he stays alive, I mean, I'm not saying anything, you see my point. I mean, who else he's running the show. He seems to be a pragmatic individual. Is he really? What does he really think? I don't know. I can't analyze his heart. But as a politician, some of the things he says are quite astute, quite astute. He's not a he's quite sharp, quite astute. He's trying to balance all these things for the benefit of Syria. How does it play out? And that I don't know. But it seems that it's a situation that he's in now. Maybe if Saudi and Qatar come in and they become a bastion of support for him, that will counteract somewhat the Turkish influence. But it's an imponderable. I have to be candid.
It's an imponderable, excuse me. And you also have to consider what people say when they take over governments that they weren't properly elected to, like the Taliban, telling Joe Biden when we pulled out in one of the really worst moments for the United States. The Taliban took over and they said to Biden, look, don't worry about it. We just want to rule Afghanistan. We're not going to be a problem. We're going to let women go to school. We're going to let people do that. We're not going to grow the opium, and we're not going to. They do all those things now. So women not only can't go to school and can't go out, he's mandated windows so that their voices won't carry out into the street. So what they tell you and they're growing opium again in Afghanistan. What they tell you when they get there and what they do when they feel a little more secure, maybe two different things. So you had the Ayatollah Khomeini, who didn't really announce that he was going to be the threat that he became. You have the Taliban. You have the potential in Syria for these guys to be saying, be nice to us, we'll be good, we'll be democratic, not democratic as you understand it in the West, but we'll do our thing.
I want to mention, if I may, in the Economist interview, they asked him the specific question because
I don't really care about whether he's
democratic. And they ask him, there's a concern in Syria and outside that you're going to embrace conservative Islamic rule and there'll be no role for women. His answer is, in the Islamic system, women play a role. Whoever says that a conservative Islamic system does not allow a role for women has a misunderstanding of Islam. Of course, women are almost half of society, and the majority of human resources at universities now are women, and the job market is a wide labor market for women. The Syrian women are already working. If a woman wants to work, the labor market is open to her. So, I mean, that certainly sounds okay. It sounds as okay as the Taliban. Yeah, they can go to university.
Right.
But at the same, and of course, we don't know what his group thinks and all these, the people he's been fighting with. Now, it's interesting. His first lady appeared for the first time. And when he went to Turkey, and she's also like Mrs. Emine Erdogan, a headscarfed religious woman. And so that's the element that's there. The question is, to me, more profoundly, that is whether there's going to be Sharia law in Syria, whether it's going to become as is another Islamic state, not an IS state, but an Islamic type state. And that's really, it's unknown. Is it going to be Sharia law? Says, well, yeah, if the committee says so, I'll enforce it. That's not an answer, but it's his answer. So if he continues to be in there, and he's a pragmatic individual, again, how do I know? I don't have a crystal ball, but at the same time, it looks like deep in his heart, the way he speaks, he wants to go in that direction, but he feels the pressures out there from all these other parties, particularly, obviously, Saudi and others in the Middle East who are mortally fearful of the rise of movements that become endangering to their survival. And that's what they're worried about. So, again, Saudi is the keeper of Mecca and Medina. It's not, it's definitely extraordinary in its political MBS. It's just a marvel to see what they've done and what they're doing. But at the same time, they see themselves as the keeper of the holy sites. And that's, I think, very, very important to keep in mind. And I don't know that they want to have that kind of a state or regime, but do they want a more secular republic? Again, impossible to know.
Well, I think a secular republic would be looking too far into
unlikely.
I don't know.
Hope springs eternal.
It can, that's fine. It's a good thing, but I don't see it. So if you're Israel and if you're the United States and you have an interest in, first of all, stability in the region, you don't want to see wars, actual wars breaking out. You can be happy that Iran has suffered a tremendous blow to its abilities in the region. But what would be the big concerns for you? Is the bigger concern Syria and HTS, because it is right on your doorstep and right on the doorstep of American troops in the region? Or is the bigger concern Turkey? And then what do you do? Turkey is, as you point out, a NATO member. Oh, and I want to just say this for our audience.
You said, mention it.
Same way that you said that you can't get into NATO without a unanimous vote, you can't get out either.
That's right. There's no way. I know I read on Twitter all the time, people say,
keep asking, why don't we just throw them in?
That's right. I'm happy you mentioned that. It operates by unanimity.
So the US and Israel have pretty much the same end games and interests in the region. What's the biggest problem that we see coming down the pike? Is it Iranian nukes? Is it Turkey? Is it Syria? Where are we?
I believe, I just wanted to say this. I think that, I know you're going to ask me for something positive in a moment, but the point is, and I can wrap this, I can mention it and interrelated. I think that, you know, Turkey has its aspirations, and as we talked about, it's, you know, projecting its power around the world. It's a major player regionally, internationally. It's, you know, a NATO member. It's participated in ISAF. It's done all sorts of things. And I do think that if the issue of the Kurdish issue can be resolved in a peaceful fashion, that will assuage a number of Turkey's concerns. I'm hopeful that that's the case and that we won't be stepping over the line into conflict. And I don't know that al-Shara right now wants to have an invasion force in the country, because there are a lot of fighters fighting with SDF, and they are hardened fighters. And what's amazing is the stories of the heroism of the women fighters. It really reminds you of Ukraine. These women fight. I mean, they're serious. Okay, the Turkish army is the second largest in NATO. It's a powerful army. Turkish troops fought in Korea. They were heroic. MacArthur thought they were the best troops. No question. But do we really want to have that tested on the battlefield in Syria now that HTS got this win? If I'm al-Shara, I don't. Now, from the point of view of US, to me, the pivot is those 900 or 2,000. We don't know. We have to look it up. But there are definitely American troops there. President Trump has spoken about, recently, he said, no, I think I'm going to pull them out. And by the way, again, big picture, to me, President Trump, he's looking at Gaza, I agree. And he's looking at that and he's trying to fix that. And boy, that's a lift, heavy lift. And he wants to deal with the border. And he has hundreds of executive orders. So does he want to add on? And I don't know the answer to this. And I'm not controlling the Wizard of Oz here behind the screen. But does he want to create a further vacuum in Syria by withdrawing those troops or not? And so the point being, if I'm him, I'm trying to figure out this other stuff, and boy, that's 24 hours plus a day to figure it out. Reconstructing Gaza, dealing with the border, Canada, Mexico. I mean, we could do another hour, 10 hours on 200 executive orders. Is he going to now pivot to a crisis in Syria that potentially is a world crisis? I mentioned who is involved here. Everybody and anybody. We didn't talk about the Europeans. Everybody's involved in this because Syria is a major. It's, by the way, one thing I don't want to forget, Jordan. Please, let's not forget Jordan. Jordan is vulnerable. I'm speaking to an Israeli, and then said, don't forget Jordan. Because if Syria goes south and becomes a jihadi state, which, you see people are talking about this fear, Jordan is vulnerable. Jordan is vulnerable. And that's very, very significant also for Israel. If you look at the map, you'll see that the key here is to maintain at least homeostasis, stability in Syria, because the potential for the world is ruinous. So the answer is for US and Israel, I think there's hope. But anyway, I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah, go for it, because we've come to the end of the program, and you know that I have to ask you a question that the answer to which is positive. So just keep rolling. Give us a positive thought as we sign off for the day.
I believe that the situation will stabilize. I think that the peace process with the Kurds hopefully will materialize with Öcalan. That hopefully will prevent, because Turkey's existential fear of the PKK is real, and I think is justified, and because they have attacked civilians. And you know what? A terrorist is a terrorist is a terrorist. You know, Hamas is a terrorist. They're not a freedom fighter. Let's be clear. PKK are terrorists. They made an insurgency against civilians, killing civilians. You can't do that. That is a red line. So hopefully, if that can be resolved, and Turkey can be assuaged, and Turkey will have influence, and the question is how much influence, and that again, that's in the hands of United States also, because you remember in 2019. President Trump basically told President Erdogan, please do not go in and make a major invasion. So it allowed that to be limited, and the sanctions and so forth. So my bottom line is I am optimistic, and I'm not going to be pessimistic. That's all.
And on that positive and optimistic note, Mark Meirowitz, thank you very much for a great, I don't know, I think it's like soup, you know, there's a little of this in it, a little of that in it, a little everything else.
Yeah.
We covered a lot of space. You covered a lot of space and a lot of countries and a lot of interests. And if nothing else, it is clear to our listeners how complicated life in the region is for Israel and for everybody else. Thank you for that. And for everyone else, we will not be here next week. I'm traveling, but I'll be back in 2 weeks. And I look forward to having everybody back with us. Thank you
very much, Hashan.